Hello, welcome back to the Neurospiritual Awakening podcast with Dr. Val. I am your host. As always, welcome to the show, Alex Saunders. Hello, so thrilled to have you on. Very, very exciting.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I'm sure we're going to get into some juicy, interesting subject matter today.
That is the intention of the podcast. And for the listeners, if you don't know, of course you don't know because I'm about to tell you, but Alex and I don't really know each other. So this is exciting because the last guest I had, I've known since I was 14 years old. So I've known her for 5 years, basically. But, but it makes a difference. And I love interviewing people that I don't know much about, but I can feel the vibe, and let's just get into it. So, Alex, just say whatever you want to say to introduce yourself, and we'll flow from there.
Okay, well, the short version is I used to be a pharmacist, and I got into that because I was always interested in how the body and the mind works in health. I quit that in 2017 when I realized that whole industry is pretty corrupt and we're not actually helping people get healthy and, doing the true healing of body, mind and spirit and all that type of stuff. And I started a YouTube channel where I was planning on talking about a bit of everything because I was also into investing after the financial crisis. I went down that rabbit hole of how banks, debt and money work, and that turned me into a gold and silver bug. And then I got into Bitcoin and crypto pretty early as let's try and build a decentralized system in a decentralized internet. So we end up talking a lot about crypto and investing just because that was very hot at the time. That's how we grew. But we always spoke about world news and politics and corruption, health, that type of thing as well. And these days, we're just finding ourselves doing more and more on the corruption as all this stuff, we've been talking about the Epstein files and Australia's connection to it for a few years now, and people thought that was crazy. And then obviously we got a lot of confirmation last week. So we're just trying to explain to people how the world really works and how to claim back your sovereignty and spirituality and all that type of thing.
How exciting. I already love it because I had no idea that you were a pharmacist. So I see it. That's right. We both come from a very, very scientific 3D based field. I did my PhD at Melbourne University, but it was in neuroscience, but there was a lot of pharma testing because of course all of research gets funded by pharma. And I was so lucky to do my PhD in a lab that was still curiosity driven. Like we were trying to examine a specific pathway within the brain and what does that do to behavior. And of course some of the funding came from trying to pharma the whole thing to say, oh well, this pathway is involved in anxiety, so we're testing drugs to figure out whether it really works. But we weren't really doing that. My PhD supervisor was really just curious, and I love the fact that I wound up by chance, of course not by chance, in that lab. And of course, after I finished my PhD, the whole thing fell apart. He never got any more funding because nobody wants to fund research that's just about science these days, bottom
Yes.
line.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. And so when did you have, 2017, this is the Neurospiritual Awakening podcast. So what was your flavor of the awakening where you were like, okay, what is actually happening here? I know you said it in a nutshell in your intro, but let's dig a little deeper.
So I was always someone that saw the world differently. And I remember when we got the internet in 1999, I think it was in grade 6, and I was Googling UFOs and aliens. And I look back on that now and I was like, I don't know what made me curious and into that weird and wonderful sort of stuff. And then I was always into natural health while I was studying pharmacy. And that's when I already started to see things that just weren't making sense about, sugar and the demonization of, healthy fats and the cholesterol. And so there was all these things where I was always looked at both sides of the world. And I got into meditation at that time and started to have a few synchronicities and saw how that was really beneficial. And then I kind of went away from it for a few years when I got caught in the matrix and I was a pharmacist. Just playing sport and just kind of living that 9 to 5 life. And then it was when I quit, when I really went all in back on that, had plenty of great experiences with mushrooms and DMT, the mind altering things for that spiritual personal growth, and that nothing will open your mind quicker than doing that in the right set and setting and all that type of thing. And so from there, it was just, let's speak truth and authenticity and let's see what's really going on. Because I'd always been aware that governments and politics was corrupt. and the banking system was evil. But now we're getting the deeper and deeper layers that there's very dark, sinister agenda and people at the top pulling the strings of all this and trying to push the world in a bad direction and, make people sick and unhappy and disconnect them from their spirituality. And so I think once we reconnect with that's the key to everything, really.
Yeah. Don't you love it when you're like a piece of the Matrix and then you go flip on it and you're like, "No, fuck you guys. I knew this place wasn't what it seemed to be this whole time." It's very interesting.
Well,
Um,
one other
yeah.
thing I might just mention quickly that I broke my back playing Aussie rules footy in 2015, and I got put on painkillers, and I knew the risks of opiates and all that, but it was a slow build up, and I ended up pretty badly addicted to opiates, and that was kind of another dark night of the soul where getting off them and the withdrawal, and this all kind of happened around that same time with all these life changes, and yeah, that was kind of my really dark night of the soul, and then regrowth from there and rebuild from there. Yeah.
Wow, how fascinating. And this is, I was just talking to my friend on the last episode about sometimes knowing makes no difference because I can acknowledge that I am addicted to knowledge. Like, I'm fucking addicted. Like, right, I've got a PhD in neuroscience. Like, how addicted can you get? That is like, you want to know, right? I want to know everything. I want to go down every rabbit hole. I just want to know. And then I realized, like, sometimes knowing makes no difference in the case of I know exactly what that drug's going to do to my brain, or in your case, to the entire physiology of your body. You're a fucking pharmacist. And then there you are, knowing that that does that, and it makes no difference. And most people operate that way. But yeah, knowing yeah, it's kind of like, yeah, knowledge is power, like in the case of what's happening now with the Epstein files and all this stuff. However, also, there is a point at which knowing makes no difference. It's like, well, now what? Now that all this shit's uncovered, now what? Are you going to unplug from the Matrix straight away? Because I listen to people like, Billy Carson, Max Sloan, and they're like, we don't do nothing. We just sit here, we do fuck all, and that's how we stop this whole machine from rolling. And then it's like the actioning of that. Well, ooh.
Yeah, and that gets into gnosis, right? You can read about something and think that you know about it, but it's actually experiencing it and truly knowing it, which is a different perception. Yeah.
Yeah, experiential. That's right. That's another topic I've touched upon in quite a few interviews now, is that the the lived experience is what matters. Like I gave this example of psychosis as a behavioral neuroscientist. Of course, I can tell you the theory, my knowledge, theoretical basis of what psychosis, stress-induced, drug-induced, whatever. And then there's people in psychosis. Like I dealt with a family member in psychosis. And I was like, my knowledge made fuck all difference in that very moment that was happening. It wasn't until I experienced being like hands-on, being with a person dealing with that I was like, okay. Okay.
Have you
Yeah.
heard of Dr. Christian Bogner and the work he's doing reversing psychosis and autism in Europe and America? I'll put you in touch if you haven't. He'd be an amazing guest. We had him on the show, and they're healing. Basically, they've got a three-prong approach, like heal the gut and stop leaky gut, remove toxins and particularly heavy metals and that from the brain with chelators. And then a lot of people they found have got deficiencies or mutations where they can't process certain enzymes and they have a buildup of serotonin and endogenous DMT. And he thinks that a lot of people in psychosis are almost stuck in a trip and they're having
Really?
amazing success rates when they start to treat all this.
Wow, no, I'd love to speak to him because that's very, I mean, yeah, I'm curious, first of all, but I understand that field. Yeah, yes, very exciting. But yeah, serotonin, of course, being primarily produced by the gut. Most people don't even know that. So there you go. There you have it. If you thought it was a brain happy molecule, think again. It's produced by the gut primarily, but of course, not many people tell you that because that's the world we live in.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, well then what now for you? How do you well, like what about your life now? Like what do you obviously you run the news and what else? You're a dad, I can hear from what I
Yeah.
know.
So I'm a dad. I've got two boys. YouTube is our main platform. We put out content and X or Twitter, but we try to put out content everywhere these days. People's attention spans have shortened, so the short clips on TikTok and Instagram and Facebook always do really well. And it is a good way to get the message out, even though it is kind of cheesy making those short little clips, I find, because I'd rather sit down with someone and have an hour, 2 hour chat. So we kind of do that full scope of content. We still have like a paid research newsletter for our investing side of things. And then we just have the little sponsors on YouTube that sort of ticks along. And yeah, I've been doing this full time for this is 9 years in June this year. Yeah.
How exciting. Oh my goodness. I wonder, I'm fascinated with numerology. I know it's my fascination. Say what you say, but I love it. I wonder what your number is. What's your numbers? Maybe you know, but I don't know.
I had all that done a while back. I think it was the number one. I can't remember.
Wouldn't be surprised, but we can dig into that. I'll ask you later. But for now, let's say, well, so what's the intention? Like, what's your vision for what you're up to inside the grand scheme of things? I know it's like kind of a billboard type question, but I'm asking you it regardless.
So, I mean, the way I view the world now, that I feel like we're getting, there's always further to go down the rabbit holes and more to learn. But I feel like once you kind of have a really good grasp on how the world works and these agendas that they're pushing, and there's a concerted effort to keep humanity and the average person in the dark about our true nature. The war, I think, ultimately is on consciousness. And that's where we get into all these other, health related problems, fluoride, GMOs, pesticides, the chemtrails now, everything they're doing to kind of keep people sick and dumbed down. And then we get into the mental side of things with all the propaganda and Hollywood and the mainstream media. And so I think they've covered up our true history. Just everything is a lie basically once you really wake up, and you have to start learning again from scratch how to be healthy and how to look after your mind and what is our true purpose here and all this type of thing. So I think you need to have a healthy body and mind to be able to comprehend a lot of this. And so I feel like the feedback I get is that once you wake people up to all this type of corruption, the way world really works, they kind of go through that awakening a bit themselves and start to ask more questions. And then you can kind of get people on that spiritual path. And with everything that's coming out now, the New World Order and the people that run the world, a lot of them are these Satanists using blackmail and doing these horrific things to kids and all this. And so this war on consciousness, the opposite must be true, where we have this inner divinity or spark or whatever people want to call it. And so they are trying to dumb that down and keep that from us. They want you to work 9 to 5, be old and sick and retire and never actually live a fulfilling life. So I just think the world could be such a better place once more and more people are waking up, as we're seeing right now. Like, it's happening faster than ever. Some of these topics that were woo-woo are now on some of the biggest podcasts and YouTube channels in the world. And even YouTube's algorithm, you're allowed to talk about a lot of this stuff you were never allowed to talk about. So we're kind of living through that great awakening, and that gives me hope about the future of all aspects of life and human potential, really.
Yeah. Yes. Wow, you talk so fast. I love it because I love that level of pace as well. But then it keeps me like, oh, and then. But listen, let me ask let me ask you this, right? So let's take a spiritual turn, given that this is the Neuro Spiritual Awakening podcast. How does the spirituality fit in for you? And I know you mentioned that you started to meditate and all that. And as a neuroscientist, like I do a lot of workshops in yoga studios, but also for, within the corporate mental health space, where basically I tell them that meditation is the fastest way to rewire your brain. Unless you do want to go and sit an ayahuasca journey with the right people at the right time, meditation is highly recommended by yours truly. But yeah, tell me more about that, the spiritual side of things, because we're both scientists, and yet here we find ourselves at this intersection where, well, it's a spiritual warfare, there's a spiritual existence, we're spiritual beings having this existence. What about that, according to you?
So I think humans are programmable beings. So, monkey see, monkey do, whether it's a toddler or an adult, we are a product of our environment, and we are programmed all through school, then all through the media, and that repetition. And a lot of the mainstream is based around fear, obviously through the media and all that type of stuff, right? So we're constantly and we're the only animal species that really are constantly put in a state of fear and there's scarcity of all resources and there's overpopulation and there's always something going wrong. So this is all just, nonsense once you wake up to it. None of it's true. If you turn the TV off, you'll be happier than ever. So I view it as, Carl Jung and others that have spoken about us, our consciousness or our mind as like layers of an onion. And one of the hardest things when you're waking up is unlearning everything, because everything you've been taught at school and from your group of friends and all that is not actually true. It's not authentic. And so once you strip all that back, I feel like we get closer to our source, our consciousness, which is kind of where our creativity comes from when we're meditating or doing breath work, or, some people get this just from going for a jog and they feel zen, as well, all the way through to psychedelics and the more extreme shortcuts. So, yeah, that's what I feel like the fluoridation of the pineal gland, the over medication. What is it now? 1 in 2 people have some sort of mental health issue, and a lot of even the research coming out now about serotonin, it's not actually a chemical imbalance, yet we're still throwing these drugs that increase serotonin to people for depression and anxiety. So none of it actually makes sense. And when you look at the studies, the outcomes aren't even that great, and there's a long list of side effects. So all these things I feel like are just putting people in brain fog, or just not treating the actual root cause. And so everyone now in this matrix with the cost of living crisis, the world that we live in, it's very hard to live a fulfilling, happy life. And a lot of people are depressed and anxious. And I kind of want people to understand there's nothing wrong with them. This is actually a deliberately designed system to suck out your energy and your money and your happiness. And so you kind of got to try and build that life outside that system. And yes, we need to have a foot in the real world still, because people need to earn money, and that's the reality. But once you're aware of this, it almost becomes like a fun video game you're playing. And as we wake up more and more people, you'll find more friends that grow their own food or have their own meat, and you start to become less and less dependent on that system. And you'll just find that life is a completely different experience once you realize all this.
Yes. Yes, yes, yes. Again, I've got so much to say, but let me try and say it one thing at a time. With the fear-based programming, right? So I happen to have done my PhD in the neural circuitry of fear. Lucky me. But but yeah, in a nutshell, that's right. The fear circuitry is so ancient, right? It's a primordial brain, conserved, evolutionarily conserved across species, across time. We all have it, and it's a survival mechanism, but it's not meant to run 24/7 the way that it runs in us. We're, in that state most of the time, which it's like, okay, come on now. That's right. So it's really great to say that the conditioning is designed in that way, is to keep you in that state. And of course, when you are in that survival state, when your amygdala and, is running the show, there's no awareness, there's no opportunity to do anything else other than survive. Um, and then epigenetics, right? So I'm so into epigenetics. I made a fucking digital course about it for people, because I was like, hey, if you think we're fucked, yes, but also no, because epigenetics is reversible. As much as we're in this environment that doesn't support many things, many positive things, we can also reverse it, because I always say it's 10% genetics, 90% environment. Whatever environment you place yourself in is vital to the way that your DNA gets expressed, and then to who you become or who you are.
So, yeah, I've got a lot of theories on junk DNA and epigenetics and all that, but yeah, sorry, you keep going.
Yeah, well, no, let's get into it, because I think we started to talk about it. We can talk a little bit about it, because that's right. People think that, well, junk DNA, right? I mean, only 1% of our DNA becomes proteins and then becomes like a thing, either when it's a physical particle, whatever. But then 90%, it literally is called junk by some people, but it's not, right? There's so many introns, regulatory aspects within that can even get expressed sometimes, depending on what environment you place yourself in. And, a lot of the spiritualist world is also talking about the 12-stranded DNA. I'm not talking about 12 strands of DNA. I'm still just down to the 2, but, we can explore that too, because it's a thing. Like, people are talking about, well, what is a DNA activation? What are all these fucking light codes that are activating my DNA? What does that even mean? You know, a lay person doesn't even know what the fuck DNA activation is. But, from a scientific perspective, it's literally a gene is not expressed and then something happens and it is expressed now, whether it's the down regulation of things like serotonin or upregulation of things like, I don't know, the stress molecule, right?
Yeah, and I think human beings are so much more flexible than we're taught. So, as you said, if you're put in a certain environment for multiple generations, I think those mild adaptations can have happen pretty quickly. Um, that's passed on through the generations, as you touched about. So, if mum's in a really traumatic environment, the child will come out with more programming towards that stressful environment. So this all ties in together. The DNA activation, as you said, it can be things that you're doing, and it can be the food and the nutrition you're putting in your body, as well as the mental work we touched on. But I also think sunlight and the frequencies of sunlight and all that are very important. And this maybe ties into a bit for people that like to talk about astrology and all the different energies. And I think there's something to all of that as well. Um,
Yes.
but I think this is another reason why they've made people. I think the stat is 90% of people worked outdoors 2 generations ago. Now 90% of people work indoors under artificial blue light and all the stuff we know is so bad for us now. And so maybe another reason they're spraying the skies. We just had one of the worst summers we've ever had in Australia. Constantly, you see the lines going across by mid afternoon. It's just this thin haze. So, is that one of the reasons they're trying to block out the sun from these DNA activating codes and sunlight that's good for us?
Yeah, no, yeah. I mean, hey, astrology or not, as I was saying, light activation, right? It is the sunlight is a frequency. It's a thing. I mean, it's not it's not just like a bright shiny ball in the sky. It has an impact, photosynthesis, all that stuff. Like, the vitamin D, like, okay, that's the basic scientific thing that people know with the sunshine, right? But it has an actual impact, that's right, on you at the level of your DNA at the cellular level, of course. So yes, 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 yes. Okay, so then I remember this other thing I was gonna say. I grew up in Russia, as I was telling you, and I spent a lot of time living with grandma, and she had she was self-sufficient, right? She lived in a village, and she had her pigs, her chickens, like her garden, ultimately nothing. So that's the environment that I grew up in, right? So for me, it's like, dude, there's a lot of that already happening in the world. Um, but but then there's the cities that we kind of live in. So I actually don't know what the percentages of people is in the world that live like my grandma and I used to live in the 80s versus
Yeah.
yeah.
It's a pretty Western phenomenon, right? So all 4 of my grandparents lived into their 90s, down to grandma now. She's the last one, and she's still got all her veggie garden and everything they've had forever. But it was really sort of from her generation in the West where this matrix control system has been pushed hard, because obviously there's plenty of developing countries and places where they still don't have huge government that has say in every aspect of your life. They still all have little small businesses and local farms and all that produce. And so, yeah, it very much is, Australia, America, Canada, New Zealand, those kind of Five Eyes countries you hear about, where this control, satanic network that's kind of put their claws into every aspect of our lives has taken control. But it's all kind of coming to the light and being undone now, right? People are realizing this and going, I don't want to live this way.
Oh, no, we don't. And what do you feel is like the best way to get out now? Like if we're talking to, if someone's listening to this and they're like literally sitting I love to give this example, in their cubicle at work, and they're like, let me out. What's one thing that you can recommend?
Make a list of pros and cons. And I see this a lot with some of my friends that live in the big cities now in Australia, and they drive an hour or two to work in traffic, an hour or two home. By the time you're barely spending any time with your kids, and maybe you're making more money and there's a slightly higher paying job and all that type of stuff, but really write down the pros and cons of if you were to move to a more country area or somewhere different, could you pick up any type of work? How many people today do you think would be really happy to go back to the old days and be doing the farming, looking after the kids, doing everything in like a community setting, being outdoors with all their friends versus what they're going to do now. So that's where I think the pendulum is kind of swinging back to.
Right.
But yeah, not everyone has that optionality to just get up and move, but start doing little things like going to a yoga class or try and find like-minded people. And that's something that we want to start doing as well, trying to encourage local meetups because we have local meetups, but anyone can start a local meetup. And if you know you're going to meet up with 10 other like-minded people, that's a lot of people were struggling to find that connection. And if you wake up when your friends and family are still asleep, you know how hard it is, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I do. And that's it. So the social interaction is one of the best, again, epigenetics, right? Your social environment. It's one of the best things that you can do for your brain to combat things like isolation, which is, of course, why shit like COVID and isolation happen. Is to really mentally fuck us. That's my clinical expression as a behavioral neuroscientist of what. But social isolation is the worst thing that you could do to your. I mean, one of the worst things that you can do to your brain. I did lots and lots of studies on social isolation during my PhD, and it's really crazy, or rather not, like, it's actually so palpable, and drastically different living in isolation versus in social connection. Like, neuronal growth happens so much easier, quicker, and more efficiently when you are surrounded by positive social,
Yeah.
not narcissist, not the other one.
Well, yeah, if we can dig into that a little bit more, I've got a bit of a theory because I notice it now when I go with my younger friends and they're constantly on their phones and that, and they really struggle to have deep conversations. And I think this all ties into people losing their ability to think critically and understand all this stuff that is going on. And then they start to feel a bit of hopelessness because, young people now, how hard is it to afford a house in Australia and that type of thing? They almost have given up hope. And that's obviously not good for our neurochemistry and everything, right? So I have
Yeah.
this theory about the dopamine and serotonin being like the yin and the yang in the brain. And in the regard that this entire matrix control system is geared towards dopamine.
Hmm.
Addictions, everyone's addicted to gambling, porn, gaming, vaping, drinking, sex, all this type of stuff. And everything that's wired through the media and social media, materialism of you have to have the best car, your Instagram photos and the best house and all this stuff. So it's all dopamine pedal constantly on. Um, and now look at the rates of kids with ADD and all this type of stuff, and we're giving them drugs that flood the brain with more dopamine and stuff. So the opposite of that is the serotonin, which is like appreciation, gratitude, connection. That's what meditation and psychedelic drugs increase or hit on the same receptors as serotonin to rewire that brain and have those connections, not just in the brain, outwards towards others and nature and everything as well. So I kind of think, again, this is a concerted effort to suppress all those serotonin good connection things and ramp up everyone's addictions and have that dopamine pedal on. And people talk about dopamine detoxes a bit, but I don't think where people have really explored too much how important that human connection and we're meant to live in tribes and all that type of stuff.
Yeah. Human. I mean, here I like your um theory. Yeah, I like your theory. I guess on a neurochemical level, they all they all play together. There's so many neural chemicals that we know about, the ones that we don't know about, dopamine, acetylcholine, GABA. GABA is the inhibitory neurotransmitter that floods the brain and is upregulated with things like meditation, yoga, and all that. And people without GABA tend to be quite anxious and stressed out. So that's a big player, acetylcholine, the focus molecule. But dopamine, yeah, I mean, for sure, for sure. You can also say that there's healthy dopamine expression, such as through love, like real love, not just
Yeah, yeah,
sex, or
yeah,
that,
yeah.
like real intimacy or a different flavor that upregulates dopamine. Dopamine neurons are also the neurons that are depleted in Parkinson's. I did a postdoc in Parkinson's on the VTA, which is the ventral tegmental area. So that's the area with dopaminergic neurons, and those are the ones that get depleted in Parkinson's. So then it has that function as well, right? Not just reward, not just the reward circuit. It also has a function in diseases like that. And I mean, again, we can go down the rabbit hole of how
Yeah.
people get Parkinson's, but this is not now. Let's just not
Yeah.
go there now. Not yet. But I think it's a vast field of interplay of many different chemicals, neurochemicals, physiological, molecules that interact with one another. And yeah, the more that we place that machine that we are with all the chemicals and neural chemicals and all that stuff in nature, where it can interact with natural expressions of those things as well in the environment, that's probably the best way to balance and to live, to live, in my view. I don't know, there's research done on it. I haven't personally done it, but yeah, it's probably a more organic, a more favorable way, a more sustainable way to live and to regulate yourself at the neurochemical level
Yeah.
versus doing it synthetically through porn
Yeah.
or fill in the blank.
Well, yeah. I mean, everything I sort of talk about as well ties back to nature and just getting back to the way that humans were meant to live. Because if you think about how fast uh, technology has accelerated, it's out of control compared to our kind of spiritual growth, emotional maturity. And people kind of can go down that rabbit hole of, well, where did we even get some of this technology from? Going from horses and carts to, fiber optics and quantum and AI and stuff within, 100 years? And if human beings have never really changed and then this has all come along, how often like the porn thing, it's just not natural to see that constantly. The foods and the sugar that don't exist naturally in the environment. All this other stimulus like gaming and these kids are all playing these shoot 'em games and it's just numbed them to like death and violence and stuff now. And yeah, just none of this is natural and what our brain has ever had to process before. So it's constantly overloaded.
Totally, totally. It's actually one of the things that I touch upon every time I talk anywhere, whether it's anywhere. Literally, I say that our brains evolved to be out in nature, and it's only in the very recent times that we've placed ourselves in front of screens, in front of these environments, but which makes people so tired, right? Because that kind of focus, that kind of attention that's required these days in front of so many screens and technology is very, very tiresome for the brain. Our brain's adapted to be in nature. So that's why I literally tell people go outside, like sit next to a tree for at least 10 minutes on your lunch break. If, we're talking about those kinds of jobs, because then you're giving yourself your brain will naturally start to focus um effortlessly on things that it's used to focus on for eons of generations before you.
Yeah.
Just and it relaxes so and then you're more energized when you go back and have to sit in front of a screen again because it's very the neural pathways, yeah, they're energy heavy.
Yeah, and energy is another big thing, and just the natural frequencies of walking on grass barefoot and or being out in nature, versus again artificial lights. You're surrounded by Wi-Fi, surrounded by 5G towers. I think we'll look back on a lot of this stuff and acknowledge that all this EMF and that was doing damage for sure.
Yeah. And well, that's great. As we're leading towards the end of the conversation, this question keeps popping up. Although all this stuff, this unfavorable environment, including technology, chemtrails, toxins, fluoride, all this shit, right? This toxic environment that we live in, we're still alive and and in some cases thriving. I mean, I'm sure we're not like at the top of our game in terms of thriving, but hopefully that's where we're going, or at least that's my intent. But we're pretty resilient as like an organism. I don't know whether the people that are trying and have tried to fuck with us were aware or even expected this level of resilience. Just even the human body, like, oh my gosh, we're constantly sprayed with shit, like exposed to shit, and we're fine.
Well, yeah, I mean, at the top of this, they don't want to kill all of humanity. They kind of need us, right? So it's almost I view it as like a human farm. So they just want people just dumbed down and sick enough where they're just going to go to work and not question anything and not get on the spiritual path and push back against them because you've got to remember it's a tiny group of people controlling the world. So once everyone wakes up, they've got no hope. But yeah, as you say, I don't say this to like black pill people and say it's all bad. I say it because once you become aware of these things and you get your water filter to get out the fluoride and the pesticides, you start going to the farmer's market to get healthy food, organic meat or whatever you want to diet preference and eat. Yeah, once you're aware of all this stuff, then you kind of very quickly you'll start to get more creativity and maybe you'll start a side hustle or you'll just be happier in yourself knowing like I spoke about before that there's nothing wrong with you. It's like the world's getting crazy because everyone has been programmed and we got to try and help these people wake up to what's really going on and realize that a lot of it is just victims of mind control through the media and everything that they don't really believe a lot of these things and with all this social unrest and this absolutely division is the main cause. They want you to pick a side no matter what you're on, politics or any of these agendas. And once people, I think, realize how evil these people are and what they've been doing to children. And this is why we've been covering a lot on the channel because this is the thing that can unite humanity. It doesn't matter what your skin color is or whatever. Once you realize the people in control that have been pushing these agendas on you and lying to you through the media and your politicians and all the rich and famous, what they believe in and what they're doing to children, all this stuff behind closed doors while they come out and smile. Yeah, that's when humanity's going to stop listening to them and start realizing that, they're the evil ones. We're all actually, they're trying to get us to all fear each other, but we're all actually just trying to get by and have a life.
Yeah, yeah. Wow, very powerful message for sure. All right. Well, I've got I've got no more questions unless there's anything else you want to talk about, but otherwise happy to end this
What
conversation here. But yeah.
I've got a question. Like, what how have you seen? You touched on the science before that they don't fund real science. What do you think are like the biggest areas of potential? Is it like the results we're seeing with psychedelics to heal people in this mental health crisis? Like, what are the biggest sort of things that you think are suppressed or covered up or not allowed to come out that you think could kind of help humanity with everything you've learned?
Oh, just basic science on how the brain works even. Like that research is not going to see the light of day because it's not unless it's linked to some anxiolytic or some drug. Like even just learning, we don't, there's a lot of things we don't. Yeah, neuroscience is a hot topic, blah blah blah. But like, there's a lot we don't know about the brain, and how yeah, it's amazing, but also lazy and dangerous and all this stuff. And, how mind control works. Like, the research on that is unlikely to see the light of day because, well, who would want that?
Yeah.
And I'm talking about, right, those kinds of people. Um, just basic research. I mean, I'm telling you, we found the lab that I did my PhD in, we found this molecule that was discovered in 2001 called relaxin-3, and it's blah blah blah. But it's in gosh, it's implicated or involved in so many behaviors from thirst to drinking to arousal to anxiety, stress, and it's like, my goodness. And that research got shut down. Like, yeah, as if people don't like stuff like that. Basic scientific research that is fun, that is fueled through curiosity. Like, let's find out how this works and let people in on this. That kind of research, unfortunately, does not see the light of day. Um, with things like psychedelics, yeah, there's a lot. One of my PhD colleagues former PhD colleagues was big on like he used to bring, bark into the lab and pull DMT from. It was pretty funny. But at the time, right, this is like a decade ago, but he's big into that field. But that's also a very, I don't know what fuels a lot of that either, because people can get a little bit crazy on that scene as well with the psychedelics, and then it becomes really unhealthy. And then I'm like, well, are you deteriorating or are you actually uh,
Yes.
healthy? What's
Yeah,
happening
no, it has to
there?
be done with the like right intention for like healing trauma or personal growth or all that set and setting is so important because you are opening yourself up spiritually as well. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%, right? So, well, yeah, psychedelics, I think it's better. I'm pro, doing mushrooms versus doing Xanax, and at the same time, I'm like, you need to do your own research and this is not my medical advice by any means. I'm just saying what my personal preference is. I've never tried Xanax, so I don't know. I'm biased. I've only done the mushrooms, right? But anything natural in my understanding as a neuroscientist and the way that we have evolved and co-evolved with nature is probably the best way forward. And in that arena, yeah, I think psychedelic research is great. But, if we're telling people to smoke weed and do ecstasy, like that's just another escape mechanism. Like what, again, it's the conditioning, right? That will have that kind of research either flourish and be what it's intended to be or not. And then again, it's that whole like where are we at as a consciousness, um, as human beings? Because then we can bring in the plant medicines, but then look what's happening. Like look what's happening, literally with the ayahuasca journey. Like it's a fucking trip now for most people, and that's so disgusting, right? For not only for the cultural aspect and people who do it in the way that it's meant to be done, but also just I don't know, just trashing.
Yeah, no, I agree. Again, it comes down to intention. Some people can smoke a bit of weed and they say it helps their creativity or their pain or whatever, and that's fine. But if you're going to sit around and just watch Netflix stoned all day, that's obviously different. And MDMA is showing a lot of promise in really opening people up therapeutically. But if you just go get drunk and have it at a rave, that's obviously very different. So again, it all comes down to intention.
Yeah, yeah, and the dose making the poison, right? It's like I don't think Shulgin or the dude that invented MDMA, or at least a flavor of it, intended for it to go the way that it went.
MDMA is found in nature naturally as well. I only learned that a couple of years back. Australia's got some grasses that are high in MDMA.
I'm not surprised. I mean, again, it's whatever is, and that's not my area of expertise, not in this lifetime anyway, but I'm sure I was some sort of a herbal witch in some lifetime because it just fascinates me, like all that, like it's all there, right? And of
Yeah.
course people, indigenous people know a lot more than I do on that topic. And again, like why not follow that down the rabbit hole and make that readily available? And hey. Yeah. All right. Well, oh my goodness, Alex, we've like traversed so many places, spaces, and I loved it. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Sorry if we jumped around a fair bit, but yeah, we got through a heap, so that was amazing. Great to connect.
Yeah, me too. And yeah, hopefully we can reconnect again here or there or somewhere. Um, and if people want to find you, where can they, if you want to be found, where
Yeah,
can they?
so Nuggets News is the name of our YouTube channel, podcast, and then all other socials, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. Yeah.
Perfect. I'll pop that in the notes. Well, again, thank you so much. And to the listeners, share this with someone because you never know whose awakening this could contribute to. All
Thank you.
right. Thank you.